Hello, seniors, and welcome to Reproductive Health / Sex Ed with Miss McClellan. I really regret the fact that we're not able to do this in person because I've been doing this for the last couple of years with seniors because, as you know, if you have been in South Carolina schools for most of your life, you have not gotten very much sex ed because it is not required by the state. There is usually a little bit of it in science, but it mostly has to do with just reproduction and none of the other stuff. So I'm going to kind of bring this to you in 4 installments. Like I said, I've been doing this the last couple of years with seniors, and it's genuinely one of the most rewarding times. It's actually really fun. And, I'm always interested to see what kind of questions you guys have and what things you know and don't know. And even if you think you know it all, and I'm not kidding myself, I'm sure some of you know plenty of this. But even if you think you know it all, chances are you don't. And the reason I say that is not because y'all are dumb, but because I meet plenty of adults who have really wrong ideas about some of this stuff. So this is an opportunity to kind of clear that up and give you guys some good information. So today, or with this video, we're going to be talking about reproduction, and in the comments or the little description area on YouTube, I'll also post a link, if it lets me, to the Google Slides presentation so that you can have links to the other videos that we use and stuff like that. So, are you guys ready? This is about reproduction. The second one is going to be about birth control, hygiene, that kind of thing. The third one is about STDs, and the fourth one is about resources and making good decisions and that kind of stuff. So, first, let's understand our bodies and fertility and childbirth. So the first important note is that, well, I guess this would be a little bit more applicable if we were all together, but this is a safe and closed space. And what that means for you guys is that I'm a safe person to come to with questions about anything that you don't understand, or, decisions that you're trying to make or anything like that. I volunteered to teach this course. I actually kind of fought for it back when we were in the old building. They didn't really want us to because of Catholicism, but meaning the building didn't want us to, not that the school didn't want us to. But I fought for it because I think it's super important information, and it's information that I don't want you guys to go out into adulthood without knowing, and because I'm not going to be embarrassed to talk to you about any of it. I'm very difficult to embarrass. I'll talk about pretty much anything with you guys. So please, again, if this were in person, it would be a little bit different, but I don't want you to be embarrassed to say or ask anything about these videos. It's better to be uncomfortable or feel a little bit awkward to ask me something for 10 seconds rather than to be wrong for the rest of your life. Ask all of your questions. I will never make you feel dumb or embarrassed about any of it. And chances are you're not the only one thinking it. So even potentially, like, if you guys do watch these and give me some questions, I might even release like a Q&A session with the questions that you guys asked, because you're probably not the only one with that question. And yes, all of my presentations are full of fun gifts like this one of Kevin Hart. So the first thing is that there are several different language levels to talk about this stuff. There's really 4 that we use to talk about our bodies and uncomfortable things and topics in the sexual arena. The first one would be childish language, talking about like number 1 or number 2 rather than poop and pee. That's not really in the sexual arena, but just to give you an example of childish language. The gutter, which you probably are aware of what that is, like get your mind out of the gutter, that kind of thing. That just means like crude euphemisms for body parts, and there are plenty, but we're not going to use any of them. Social, which I'll explain a little bit more on the next slide, but the social language is kind of what you would use to talk about these things with your friends. And the fourth one is medical, which is the actual terminology for it. And we're going to use that. I'm going to use that because it's correct. And it's the best terminology to use if you want to avoid confusion. And it's really important for people to actually learn these terms, because sometimes you're asked questions or you're told things and you don't actually know what they're talking about. I'm actually reminded of probably 3 or 4 years ago, the school nurses just did like a brief questionnaire about sexual health and that kind of thing with 6th graders. And quite a lot of 6th grade boys did not know what testicles were because they'd only heard them used in social terms. They only knew the social terminology for it, didn't know what it was. And if you don't know what it is, number one, you probably should by now, but I'm not going to make you feel embarrassed about not knowing. I'm just going to tell you later on in this slide or in this presentation. So just to clarify a little bit between social and medical language, when we are using correct medical terms for sex or sexual intercourse, those are the words we'd use. And what that translates to in social language, there are plenty of terms for it. Doing it is probably the one that that people are most familiar with, but there are plenty of others. If we are talking about a woman's time of the month, which is what we would call it in social language, we're going to say menstrual cycle or period. And you can kind of see the other ones here. There's a correlation, but we're going to keep using the medical language. And just to reiterate, there's nothing inappropriate or wrong with the social terms, at least for the most part. But we're going to stick with medical language just for the sake of clarity and correctness and being on the same page. So a few statistics here before we get into the bulk of the content. The average 13-year-old, which is way younger than you guys at this point, has witnessed sex on film and television over 1,500 times. It's a lot in 13 years. One fashion magazine on average, and by fashion magazine, I mean like the ones that you see in the line at the grocery store and that kind of thing. One fashion magazine on average has at least 25 articles with references to sex. So why am I telling you that? Because it is so prevalent in our world now. It's so ubiquitous in our society that it's kind of presented as no big deal. Like we see it all the time. We read about it all the time. We hear about it all the time. But when you're actually facing the decision of whether or not to have sex, while you might think it's no big deal, where your health is concerned, that couldn't be further from the truth. It's actually a very big deal speaking from a health perspective, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Sex can affect you in so many different ways, pretty much every way. Physically, obviously, and that's the one that we're going to primarily talk about. Sex can cause pregnancy, HIV, various STDs, and all of those can affect you for life. I mean, having a kid, my goodness, yeah, that's going to affect you for the rest of your life for sure. It can affect you mentally and emotionally. Sex is usually a very private, emotion-filled act, so it is actually a big deal for your feelings. Socially, there's a lot of stigma attached to who is or isn't having sex at any given age. That's a big one. And even bigger, think about the stigma attached to pregnancy or STDs, particularly during adolescence. There's so much judgment being passed down about your sexual decisions, whether that's right or not, and we could debate that. The truth is that it's there. There's so much judgment, and that can definitely have an effect on your social life and your self-esteem. And then also spiritually, there are a lot of people who make a serious spiritual commitment to remain abstinent, which means choosing not to have sex either until they're married or until they're a certain age or until they're in a loving relationship. And that is not to be discounted. That's very important. If you're making a serious spiritual commitment because that's what you believe is right, then that's important. So let's talk about puberty for a minute. And yes, I'm sorry. Why am I saying I'm sorry? I was going to say I'm sorry. I have a lot of Bill Hader gifts on here. I'm not sorry at all. He's my fave and everybody knows it. There are a lot of new responsibilities that come along with puberty. You probably don't think of it as new responsibilities. It's just like this unfortunate thing that happens to everybody. But what it actually means is that girls, that's the time when you start your period. Boys, that's the time you start producing sperm. So why does that equal new responsibilities? Because you are now capable of creating life. What? Just like Victor Frankenstein. Not just like him. That's not how he created life. It's just a little shout out for my English 4 kids there. Sex is not all fun and games, although I don't want to terrify you just yet because some of it can be fun and games, but you just have to understand the tremendous weight of its ability to cause life and death first. That's why it's so important. Life and death in your hands. We're talking about big things here, guys. Hang on. Okay, so some reproduction facts. Reproduction, when we say that word, what we mean is the process of making a baby. 85% of females who have sex without protection will get pregnant. Any kind of protection. And we'll go more in future presentations about like which kind of protection is the best, which kind is most effective, which kind does what. But that's important. 85% is a big percentage. 85% of females who have sex without protection will get pregnant. In one ejaculation, there are over 360 million sperm. That's so many, and it only takes one. Your odds are not good of not getting pregnant if you're not using any kind of protection. And that sounds scary. I'm not trying to really scare you because I'm gonna tell you about all the things you can do to prevent it. But again, I just kind of want to impress upon you the weight of that decision. Most girls are highly likely to get pregnant 7 days per month, and I'm going to talk about that more later. But you can get pregnant anytime, any day of the week, any day of the month. I have met plenty of grown adults, maybe not plenty, but I have met grown adults who didn't know that, who thought that there were times during the month when a woman can't get pregnant, and that's not accurate. Okay, we're gonna get ready for some infographics, kids, which means there's some pictures and they're just drawings this time, but of things that are sensitive to see. This is the female reproductive system. On the left here, we have a front view, and on the right, we have a side view. And some of that stuff's not actually like part of the reproductive system, like the colon and the rectum, but it's all kind of connected. I mean, everything in your body is connected. So let's talk about what these things actually are, and we'll go into this in just a second. That's just another view, but I kind of like this. I like this one better just because those drawings are kind of crappy on the other one. But let's see. Where should we start? Let's start with the vagina, which is right here. I don't know if you guys can see my mouse as I'm waving it around on the screen or not since I'm recording, but you can definitely follow the, whatever you call it, the labels. So the vagina is what allows for sexual intercourse and birth. It channels the menstrual flow. That's where where the menstrual fluid will come out during your cycle. It creates moisture to reduce friction during sex. And anything else? It's self-cleaning. Very cool. Magical almost. So that's, I want to point this out first and foremost, because a lot of times when people talk about the vagina, they're kind of talking about just everything, and that's not accurate. The vagina is specifically this canal, which is where the penis goes in during sex. It's where menstrual fluid comes out, and I'll tell you about all the other stuff. Let's go to cervix, which is right above the vagina and is very important. Literally in Latin, I learned this actually recently. It means neck of the uterus. Pretty cool. It's the neck. It's like the uterus is the head and this is the neck. It's like a little cylinder, and sperm has to pass through it in order to fertilize an egg. It flattens and dilates to let the fetus through when you are giving birth. So when you hear about like, she's 10 centimeters dilated, they're talking about how dilated her cervix is. And also during pregnancy, it's kind of what keeps the baby in there. So when it's time for the baby to come out, it starts dilating and allows it to come out. Very cool. Above it, that's the uterus. This little triangle in the middle, I guess. That's where the fetus is developed. It's held there. It's also known as the womb. Any other important stuff for me to tell you about the uterus? I don't think so. If I think of anything else, I will. right here along the outsides of the uterus, we have like the myometrium and endometrium, which all you really need to know, you probably don't even need to like know those words for most of life. It's just the lining. And that is what essentially sheds every month. That's what your menstrual fluid is made out of. It's cells from the endometrium and myometrium. The endometrium, endo, is the inner layer of tissue, which thickens and sheds during menstruation. The myometrium is the smooth muscle tissue, and that's also what induces uterine contraction during birth to help push that baby on out. What else? What else? Ovaries. You've got 2 of them, and they produce ovum, which is just a fancy medical word for eggs. And here's a cool thing to point out. I guess it's cool. While men can produce as much sperm as like an infinite amount of sperm, women are born with as many eggs as they'll ever have. So, you know, that's another reason why like it's important to be really careful as far as like deciding to have kids, making sure that you are aware of your body. You got all the eggs you'll ever have. And it is released, the ovums, which you can kind of see here. The ovums, ova maybe, are released and they travel down the fallopian tubes, which I'll tell you about in just a second, into the uterus, where they might be fertilized by a sperm, maybe. Fallopian tubes, basically it's just that eggs pass through them from the ovaries to the uterus. Is there anything else I need to tell you about in this? I don't think so. Colon and rectum and anus are really more digestive system, gastrointestinal than reproductive. And I think I told you everything about that. Now, are there any in this one? Yeah, the bladder, again, is not really part of the reproductive system. This is just to show you how things connect. The bladder is part of the endocrine system. The pubic bone is just part of your skeleton. Women have a little layer of fat in front of it. Labia major, this says major and minor, majora and minora. That's actually the medical terms. Those are your labial lips, which is part of the outside. They're the cutaneous folds of skin, which is just, cutaneous just means skin. So that's kind of redundant. But majora are the outer ones, minora are the inner ones. I don't think this word is on here, but vulva, that's an important word because a lot of people kind of use that interchangeably with vagina, and they're not interchangeable. Like we just saw, vagina is the actual canal, and the vulva is all the outside stuff. So it's not actually the same thing. The urethra is also a part of the endocrine system. That's where women's urine comes out. And the reason they're really showing this is because when you don't understand the female reproductive system, a lot of people think there's like just one hole and everything comes out the same place. It doesn't. Your urine comes out the urethra, your menstrual fluid comes out the vagina, and then you have your rectum and anus, which is where your defecation comes out. It's actually hard not to use social terms when you're talking about urine and defecation. And then the clitoris, which is the most sensitive erogenous zone for a woman during this is actually so interesting. During development, when a fetus is developing, the same part of you determining whether your sex is male or female, if it becomes a female, if it becomes a female fetus, then that part turns into a clitoris. If it becomes a male fetus, it turns into a penis. But they come from the same thing. Isn't that cool? Bodies are so cool. It has how many? 8,000 nerve endings. That's the most of any body part. And its only use is for sexual pleasure. That's the only reason we have it. But that's also why it's very important. Wait, did I miss anything on this? No, I think we talked about all this. And I just posted this because this is sort of a permanent form of birth control. When people talk about tying your tubes, now that we know what fallopian tubes are, this might make a little bit more sense. You like tie off and snip the fallopian tube so then the egg can't travel through. So women have two kinds of hormones, estrogen and progesterone. You can kind of see here, they affect so many things about your bodies, physically, psychologically, emotionally. Estrogen is the main one that we hear about, particularly because most forms of birth control for women, like the pill, which we'll talk about in a different presentation, contain estrogen and pump more estrogen into your body because that helps regulate your menstrual cycle. It also affects your skin and hair, your sweat glands, your mood, weight, sleep, sense of well-being, immune system, and your blood fat, which can lead to clogged arteries. Progesterone is the other female hormone, and it can affect your periods as well, your ovulation, your body temperature, your bones, your sleep, skin, bladder, blood pressure, arteries, mood, and depression. Hormones affect so many things, and men, you have a hormone too. And we all have these, by the way. Men do have a certain amount of estrogen and progesterone. Women do have a certain amount of testosterone. It's just not the main thing. It's not primary. Men would have trace amounts of these. So you guys are actually lucky because when I was in 9th grade in comprehensive health and we had our sex ed unit, we had to watch a video of a woman giving birth. And while I thought it was really cool, a lot of people, particularly the boys in my class, were traumatized. So I've just got a few pictures for you here. You can kind of see here, this is when childbirth first starts. It's the cervix here is not dilated at all. Baby is usually going to be head down. If it's not, then that's an issue. The cervix starts dilating and the baby starts slipping out and then its head gets turned. Look how weird this looks. It looks like a little cone head, and it is. And a lot of babies are born kind of cone headed because of the way that their heads are very soft and they're shaped a little bit during birth. If you are giving birth vaginally, this does not happen with C-section babies. There it comes, its neck's out, and then its shoulders are out, and bada bing, bada boom, you got a baby. This is what a C-section is. Essentially, they make an incision into the uterus, which they then have to sew up afterwards, and pull the baby out. See? No cone head. So I said that we would come back to this, and we will come back to this even more when we're talking about birth control. But a woman is most likely to get pregnant during ovulation. This is when the egg is released from her ovaries, which occurs about midway through her cycle. For those of you who don't know, a woman's cycle, if it's regular, is about 28 days. So ovulation is going to be either 2 weeks before or 2 weeks after her period. A woman is least likely to get pregnant right after her period. However, this is just when she's most and least fertile. A woman can get pregnant 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year. There is no safe time for a woman to have unprotected sex. Of course, that is the general rule, and we're not talking about people who have issues that compromise their fertility. We're not talking about women who have had hysterectomies. We're not talking about trans women. We're talking about cis women with normal cycles and everything else. This really should not be used as a method of birth control since most girls don't know when they're ovulating and many girls have irregular cycles. There are a lot of girls who take the pill not as a contraceptive, but as a means to regulate their cycle so that they'll know when their period is coming, because there are plenty of women who their cycles are just really irregular, and that can be for any number of reasons. Some people do use this as a method of birth control, and I'll explain in the birth control presentation why that might not be a great idea, but why some people like it. But It should not be used as a method of birth control if you are really sure you don't want kids. So did you know that sperm can stay alive for 5 to 7 days inside a woman's body? I'm gonna be honest with you guys, I didn't know that until probably like 3 or 4 years ago. But that's wild. And it drives me crazy because there are sometimes in like movies and TV where women who have had a kid or who are pregnant are like, I knew immediately that I was pregnant. I'm like, no, you didn't. That's not a thing. It's not magic. And a sperm can stay alive for 5 to 7 days inside your body. So you might not have gotten pregnant right away. You could get pregnant up to a week after you've had sex. Isn't that insane? It's wild. So let's talk about the fellas a little bit more. Well, let's go into the male reproductive system. Again, you've got on the left side a front view, and on the right side, oops, I just dropped some stuff. On the right side, you've got the side view. So you've got a lot. This looks like cog work and machinery to me, which is funny because I feel like just in history and pop culture, people have kind of treated the female reproductive system as like this big mystery. Like science for the female reproductive system is a fairly new thing, like in the grand scheme of time. We just didn't know a lot about it for such a long time. But we do now, thank God. But somehow that's always been the big mystery. I feel like this looks so much crazier. You've just got so many more like pipes and things. It's crazy. So, and again, there are a couple of things in here that are not necessarily part of the reproductive system, but they just show how they're connected. And, well, I'll tell you more about it when we get there. Obviously, the one that we think about first is the penis, which you can see right here or right here. It's the external male sex organ, and it's used for reproduction. I will go ahead and tell you though, the way that I pointed out how different things come out of different places in a woman, it kind of all comes out the same place here because of how it's connected. It all comes out the penis. Let's also point out, is there, yes, glands. The glands is like the bulbous part at the end of the penis. It's very sensitive. It's partially to completely covered by the foreskin in uncircumcised men. And it's basically just the tip there. Let's go to testicles or testes. One is a testis. They are the male reproductive gland. It produces sperm and testosterone, and we will talk about testosterone more in just a minute. The scrotum or scrotal sac, we can kind of see in both of these pictures there. That's it. They contain the testes and also regulate the temperature of the testes, which is good for sperm. I actually just wanted to go up to the top and point out the ureter. That's part of the endocrine system, but as you can kind of see here, it goes into the bladder and then down the urethra, which is the same thing for a woman, but whereas the urethra has its own opening in a woman's body, it comes out the penis in a man. Let's see, what else? I want to make sure we get to all of them, but in an order that makes sense. Okay, prostate. And this is kind of hard to see because it's kind of tucked back behind the bladder. You can see it there. Glands in pictures, I feel like, always look weird. Sorry, it was that one. And the prostate is a gland between the bladder and the penis, and produces and contains fluid that forms part of semen. The other thing, and do I have this picture? Yes. Seminal vesicle. That's this weird looking thing. That's a gland behind the urinary bladder that secretes fluid that partly composes semen as well. So you've got fluid coming out of the prostate gland, fluid coming out of the seminal vesicle, and sperm coming out of the testicles. And that's what semen is, the combination of those things. Oh, vas deferens. I used to know a joke with vas deferens as the punchline, and now I can't remember it. Shoot. I'm going to look it up and tell it in a different presentation because it's pretty good. Vas deferens, also, this is the thing I learned. In Latin, it means the carrying away vessel. Isn't that lovely sounding? And that's exactly what it does. It transports sperm from the epididymis to the ejaculatory ducts in your penis, and it propels sperm forward where it mixes with other secretions to form semen. And now we kind of know what those other secretions are. So I mentioned the word epididymis. We're looking at that right there for epididymis. And that's the tube that connects the testicle to the vas deferens. So it's just a connecting thing. Is there anything that I missed here? The erectile bodies, that's just tissues that become engorged with blood during arousal. And women actually have those too. You just don't really think about it as much. Obviously, they're in the penis with a man. And that's what causes the penis to become erect, is becoming engorged with blood. The fancy medical term for that is tumescence. Isn't that fun? Anything else? Oh, the bulbourethral gland. And actually, it's not even pointed to here. I think it is here. Cowper's gland. It's the same thing. Those are glands that also produce a pre-ejaculate fluid that's secreted during arousal. Anything else? Any other parts that I didn't mention? I think I mentioned all of this. Again, you can see the pubic bone here. It doesn't have the layer of fat in front that women do. There's your bladder, and that's really just showed to show you all the connections here. We were talking about erections a second ago. It is important to notice, especially during puberty, that erections can be involuntary. It just happens, and it will decrease, the frequency will decrease as you get out of puberty. I was teaching this one time and I said that, and a student was like, no, it doesn't decrease. So I promise it does. Like, it's not like it's never going to happen involuntarily, but if you feel like at this point it's still happening all the time, don't worry, it will decrease. The frequency will decrease. And then there at the bottom, it just kind of points out again, male sperm are constantly replenished every 30 to 60 days. And one ejaculation contains over 360 million sperm. It only takes one to get a woman pregnant. So I just want to reiterate that. It's very, very important that you understand how important this is. Just like I showed you the tubal ligation, or tying your tubes, the vasectomy is like the permanent form of birth control for men, which is essentially just where you cut and tie the vas deferens so that the sperm can't travel. So this is a thing, and like this is a question that gets thrown around, and another one that like plenty of adults don't know the right answer to this. And that's, what's the size of a normal or average penis? And obviously, a non-erect or flaccid penis is going to be smaller than an erect penis. The average non-erect penis is 2.5 to 4 inches long, and it will increase during an erection to about 5 to 6 inches long. The average girth, which is how big around it is, of a flaccid penis is about 3.5 inches around and about 4.5 when it's erect. I actually saw on TV the other day a study that said only 15% of penises are over 7 inches. So there's a lot of like social stigma and stuff tied to penis size, but it's very silly. And right here you have the facts of what's normal. So are you ready for a couple of odd videos? I'm going to play them, and if this video gets flagged for copyright stuff because I found these elsewhere, then I'll just edit this video and take those videos out, and we will, I'll just give you the links to them. Okay. Oh, no, go back. How do I? There we go.
Fertilization is the epic story of a single sperm facing incredible odds to unite with an egg and form a new human life. It is the story of all of us. During sexual intercourse, about 300 million sperm enter the vagina. Soon afterward, millions of them will either flow out of the vagina or die in its acidic environment. However, many survive because of the protective elements provided in the fluid surrounding them. Next, the sperm must pass through the cervix, an opening into the uterus. Usually, it remains tightly closed, but here the cervix is open for a few days while the woman ovulates. The sperm swim through the cervical mucus, which is thinned to a more watery consistency for easier passage. Once inside the cervix, the sperm continues swimming toward the uterus, though millions will die trying to make it through the mucus. Some sperm remain behind, caught in the folds of the cervix, but they may later continue the journey as a backup to the first group. Inside the uterus, muscular uterine contractions assist the sperm on their journey toward the egg. However, resident cells from the woman's immune system, mistaking the sperm for foreign invaders, destroy thousands more. Next, half the sperm head for the empty fallopian tube, while the other half swim toward the tube containing the unfertilized egg. Now, only a few thousand remain. Inside the fallopian tube, tiny cilia push the egg toward the uterus. To continue, the sperm must surge against this motion to reach the egg. Some sperm get trapped in the cilia and die. During this part of the journey, chemicals in the reproductive tract cause the membranes covering the heads of the sperm to change. As a result, the sperm become hyperactive, swimming harder and faster toward their destination. At long last, the sperm reach the egg. Only a few dozen of the original 300 million sperm remain. The egg is covered with a layer of cells called the corona radiata. The sperm must push through this layer to reach the outer layer of the egg, the zona pellucida. When sperm reach the zona pellucida, they attach to specialized sperm receptors on the surface, which triggers their acrosomes to release digestive enzymes, enabling the sperm to burrow into the layer. Inside the zona pellucida is a narrow, fluid-filled space just outside the egg cell membrane. The first sperm to make contact will fertilize the egg. After a perilous journey and against incredible odds, a single sperm attaches to the egg cell membrane. Within a few minutes, their outer membranes fuse and the egg pulls the sperm inside. This event causes changes in the egg membrane that prevent other sperm from attaching to it. Next, the egg releases chemicals that push other sperm away from the egg and create an impenetrable fertilization membrane. As the reaction spreads outward, the zona pellucida hardens, trapping any sperm unlucky enough to be caught inside. Outside the egg, sperm are no longer able to attach to the zona pellucida. Meanwhile, inside the egg, the tightly packed male genetic material spreads out. A new membrane forms around the genetic material, creating the male pronucleus. Inside, the genetic material reforms into 23 chromosomes. The female genetic material, awakened by the fusion of the sperm with the egg, finishes dividing, resulting in the female pronucleus, which also contains 23 chromosomes. As the male and female pronuclei form, spiderweb-like threads, called microtubules, pull them toward each other. The two sets of chromosomes join together, completing the process of fertilization. At this moment, a unique genetic code arises, instantly determining gender, hair color, eye color, and hundreds of other characteristics. This new single cell, the zygote, is the beginning of a new human being. And now the cilia in the fallopian tube gently sweep the zygote toward the uterus, where he or she will implant in the rich uterine lining, growing and maturing for the next 9 months until ready for birth.
I just love the dramatic music there. That's so fun. Also, I'm super curious about that. What is migraine? Because you guys know that I suffer from them. Okay. So now we have this second one, which I believe is a little shorter, about childbirth. Gross.
During a vaginal childbirth, the first stage of labor lasts about 12 to 19 hours and starts when your baby settles lower into your pelvis. In response, your cervix begins to efface or become thinner and dilate or widen. During this time, you may feel strong, regular contractions occurring every 5 to 20 minutes, and lower back pain and cramping that doesn't go away. You may see a brownish or reddish mucus discharge, which could be the mucus plug at the opening of your cervix falling out. Your water may break, which can either be a large gush of fluid or a continuous trickle. If you experience any of these symptoms, contact your doctor or midwife to see if you should go to the hospital. At the beginning of stage 2 of labor, which can last from a few minutes to 3 hours, your cervix is fully dilated to 10 centimeters. And your baby's head has moved beyond the cervical opening into your birth canal. During this stage, you will begin to push your baby out. You may instinctively push when you feel the urge, or you may need coaching from your doctor, midwife, or labor nurse as to when to push and when to rest. In a normal delivery, your baby's head will rotate to face your back. During active labor, your uterus is divided into an active segment that contracts, pushing the baby downward, and a flexible passive segment that remains relaxed, stretching to provide more room for the baby to pass through. In some cases, when the top of your baby's head appears or crowns, your doctor may make a small cut called an episiotomy to enlarge the vaginal opening. Then you will continue pushing your baby out. As your baby's head passes through the birth canal, it molds into an elongated shape.
Conehead.
An elongated head shape will resolve itself within a few days as the skull bones shift back into place. After your baby's head exits the birth canal, his or her head and shoulders will rotate to help the shoulders pass through the birth canal. Your baby's shoulders are delivered one after the other in order to fit through your pelvis. Once the shoulders emerge, the rest of your baby slides out easily. After your baby is born, his or her umbilical cord will be cut. In stage 3 of labor, which may last 5 to 30 minutes, mild contractions will help push the placenta out of the uterus. During this stage, you and your baby may begin bonding.
Oh God, I didn't mean
This
to do that.
animation is brought to you by
Sorry. You and your baby may begin bonding.
After your labor, which may last 5 to 30 minutes, mild contractions will help push the placenta out of the uterus.
We heard that.
During this stage, you and your baby may begin bonding through skin-to-skin contact and breastfeeding.
Wow, wow, wow. I have zero interest in ever doing any of that, but it's pretty incredible that we can. Actually, before we get to the end here, can we go back to full screen, please? Presentation mode, whatever. Before we get to the end here, I actually want to go way, way back because I thought of one thing that we didn't talk about. Right here at the opening of the vagina, probably about here, is another thing called the hymen, and that is a thin fleshy tissue that's located at the opening of your vagina, and it has a hole big enough for urine and tampons to pass through easily. The reason I'm pointing this out is because, you know how I was saying, there wasn't a lot of science about the female reproductive system for a long time, and it's kind of seen as this big mystery. The hymen is like number one on this list, maybe number two, that people don't know correct information about. And I am going to use a social term here for a second, because when we hear about a woman losing her virginity, we hear the term popping her cherry, and that's what this is in reference to. But the reason I'm telling you that is because scientifically it is nonsense. Some people are born with so little of a
It's
hymen.
1:00.
Thank you. Like the tissue is so thin that they almost don't have one at all. And it doesn't actually break. It stretches. Sometimes it stretches enough to where like you barely have one anymore, but it doesn't break. And there are so many other things that can cause it to stretch. Extreme exercise, horse riding, injury, tons of things. Like sometimes just normal living can cause it to stretch and break. Stretch, not break. And like I said, some people are born with barely a hymen at all. So like back in the day, people used to do like virginity tests to see like if the hymen would break or stretch. And if it did, then that person was a virgin before, but that doesn't make any sense. That's not true, because plenty of people are virgins, but their hymens are already stretched out from other things. And yes, when it stretches, there will typically be some bleeding. I just want to point that out because that's one of the common misconceptions about women's bodies. So normally I would ask if you guys have any questions. If you do, feel free to email me, come talk to me in person. Honestly, don't be embarrassed about any of it. I'm not, and I won't make you feel dumb or embarrassed about it. So come back next time and learn some more about the crazy stuff that goes on inside our amazing bodies. Hope you enjoyed.